It happened. We finally got a quote to prove what we've been talking about for a while now. If you didn't already know, we've been discussing how there was going to be an arms race between the United States and Russia in acquiring Bitcoin. We've been talking about how the United States and Russia are very soon going to be creating their own strategic national reserves for Bitcoin. And now we actually have a very, very, very solid reason to believe that the United States is going to be leading that charge. Recently, in an interview, Jim Cramer walked up to Donald Trump and asked him a very simple question. Are we going to be creating, as a nation, a strategic national reserve for Bitcoin the same way that we have for petroleum? If you don't know, the Federal Reserve, sorry, not the Federal Reserve, the federal government holds a huge amount of petroleum above ground in storage tanks in case a foreign nation were ever to embargo the United States or there were to be any kind of supply shock. We have a massive amount of petroleum, crude, to keep the economy going in that sense. And so the question was, are we going to see some kind of similar strategic national reserve for protection's sake of Bitcoin the same way that we have for petroleum? Because the economy works much the same way. You have a strategic national reserve of hard currency like the dollar for other nations, like gold for other nations and America, silver and other hard monies. And so are we going to build a strategic national reserve like that at the United States federal government level? To which Donald Trump responded, yes, I think we're going to do that. That is a direct quote from the president-elect who will be in office in about a month. So we now have essentially concrete promises that we're going to see a strategic national reserve of Bitcoin from the US, which will almost certainly be followed immediately by a strategic national reserve for every other major serious economic player on the globe, starting probably with Russia, India, China, and the European Union, all of them. But I want to ask a few questions. Number one, why is that important? Number two, where will that send Bitcoin? And number three, I also want to talk a little bit about the current price and what we should be doing to prepare ourselves for where we're going. So why is it so important that the United States would acquire a strategic national reserve of Bitcoin? Well, first we have to kind of explain what a strategic national reserve of Bitcoin is. A strategic national reserve is simply a nation acquiring a coin and holding it for the sake of solvency of their currency. See, the United States dollar inflates. And one of the ways that you maintain a hard currency is by backing that currency, that fiat currency, in something that is hard money, like gold, like silver, or in this case, like Bitcoin. The way that this normally works is most nations that have higher inflation than the US dollar, which is most nations, hold the US dollar as a reserve currency. And they use that reserve currency to strengthen their currency. But the United States can't really hold the US dollars to stop the inflation of the US dollar because it just doesn't work that way. That's like, trying to stand on your own head to reach higher. You can't do that because you're in your own way, right? So if the United States wants a hard money, they've got to look to natural commodities like gold, silver, oil, or Bitcoin, for example. And so the reason that the United States would do this would be to make sure that we have an economic weapon against any other nation that would try and rebel against the dollar. You've got the BRICS countries trying to start their own currency. You've got basically a geopolitical economic Cold War going on between the former Soviet, which is basically just Russia and Belarus right now, and the United States. That war is mostly being fought on the currency level. It's mostly being fought through arms, which are basically just a materialized version of money. So it's basically two superpowers fighting with money. So if the government of the United States adopts Bitcoin, they can make their money harder, hopefully bringing down inflation, allowing the United States dollar to be a weapon used against Russia, because Russia is still, along with China, one of the two biggest geopolitical adversaries that the United States faces. So Trump sees the dots, and he has connected them to say, hey, if I use Bitcoin to make the dollar stronger, because he knows that Bitcoin's never going to replace the dollar. But if I use Bitcoin to make the dollar stronger, then the dollar being stronger allows him, the president, to have a stronger arm to attack Russia and China. They're both nuclear states. It's never going to get to actual all-out war, so you're left with economic warfare. And the way that you win an economic war is through having a hard currency. That's where Bitcoin comes into the equation. So that's the why. But what does that mean for Bitcoin, and what would that look like? Senator Cynthia Lummis has put forward a bill several months ago for the United States to acquire a strategic national reserve of Bitcoin. The United States federal government holds about 208,000 Bitcoin right now, most of which were acquired when Silk Road was taken down about 10 years ago. And so obviously that's a considerable portion of the total amount of Bitcoin in the world. It's about 1% of all Bitcoin in existence is owned by the United States federal government. Under Cynthia Lummis's plan, the United States federal government would acquire 200,000 Bitcoin per year until the government reached 1 million more Bitcoin, which would apparently mean 1.2 million Bitcoin held by the United States federal government. And The reason, so the way that would look would be over 5 years, there'd be 200,000 acquired, and that'd be about 6% of Bitcoin supply held by the United States government. That, of course, would likely lead the United States' adversaries like Russia, China, European Union, not exactly an adversary, but there's some adversarial sentiment there sometimes, right, to be acquiring Bitcoin to catch up, right? And that's why we use this term arms race, right? It's a Bitcoin arms race. There should be somebody should write a book about that. If I had time, I'd do it. The Bitcoin arms race, it's coming. The next 10 years, it's going to be a big deal. And so what does that do for the price? What that does for the price is that you see nation states, not just individuals, not just companies, nation states, superpowers acquiring Bitcoin. That brings the supply down dramatically because Bitcoin is being taken out of the ecosystem hand over fist. If the United States acquires 6% of the Bitcoin in the world, I wouldn't be surprised if other nations around the world also acquire up to collectively probably another 6% of the portfolio. You could see 15 to 20% of the total amount of Bitcoin in circulation being held by sovereign nations in the next 10 to 15 years. When you throw in the amount of companies that are adopting Bitcoin and the hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin that some of them are hoovering up, then it becomes ever more apparent that the supply of Bitcoin is exceedingly low, exceedingly low. And the demand is only continuing to go up as you see nation states that are going to be adopting Bitcoin, as you see major companies that are going to be adopting Bitcoin, and individuals, you and me alike, investing for the long term. We now recommend up to 10% of your retirement accounts being invested into Bitcoin. Now, that's just an opinion, right? I'm just a guy on the internet, but it's an idea. It's something that we put forward because Bitcoin has a very strong use case and a very strong future. And the people that see that are making a lot of money right now. That's why we buy Bitcoin every single day. So, kind of our third point here. And what I just said kind of leads into that. What should we be doing? And where's Bitcoin going to go? Well, Bitcoin, in my opinion, is going to pass gold's market capitalization because Bitcoin does gold better than gold. I've been saying that for a while. Bitcoin does gold better than gold does gold. It's really that simple. Gold has a 3% year-over-year inflation. Well, on a good year, the United States dollar will inflate less than gold does. So gold, some years, every once in a while, if the dollar's doing particularly well and government spending isn't too crazy out of control, like 2 trillion instead of 3 trillion deficit, right? Then gold can inflate more than the dollar. So people are not looking to gold anymore for gold. They're looking to Bitcoin. And so the price target there, I think that in the next 10 to 12 years, Bitcoin's going to surpass gold's market capitalization. Current market cap is $18 trillion. That would be a $900,000 Bitcoin. By the end of the 2030s, I think Bitcoin will probably be trading at $2 to $3 million per coin. That will be a 20 to 30x from where we are right now, which means that getting invested in Bitcoin now is paramount if you want to build long-term wealth. Now, for this cycle, we're looking at most likely a $150,000 to $200,000 Bitcoin as a result of everything I just mentioned. There's an enormous amount of bullishness coming into the space with Trump getting elected. Trump has appointed Paul Atkins, pro-cryptocurrency chairman to the SEC, David Sachs, former chief operating officer over at PayPal when it was in the foundational era. He then left PayPal to go found Yammer, sold it for $1.4 billion to Microsoft, and now he helps a bunch of different companies fundraise. He's now raising hundreds of millions, if not, over multiple billions of dollars for startup companies. These are the kind of people that Trump is putting in the federal government and in very, very important positions of power. Elon Musk is a very well-known cryptocurrency advocate. He loves Bitcoin. He's putting him in in the Department of Government Efficiency. A lot of different areas in the government are going to be very much individually, like the leadership of these different departments are pro-cryptocurrency. So 150 to 200, I think, is conservative. When you get to the altcoins, I think that Cardano, as we talked about in yesterday's video, 780 is possible. This cycle, Ethereum, as we'll talk about in future content, could easily hit $8,000 to $9,000 this cycle. Solana could hit 600, 700, 800. And the list goes on, and we will continue to talk about those price targets as we move forward here through the cycle. But the important thing for you, and this is the application and where I kind of want to land, we started with this is the way the world works. We're going to end with this is the way that you ought to be working and the way that I ought to be working, is we need to build an understanding. What the Bible teaches is that knowledge allows us to have understanding. Understanding and knowledge allow us to have wisdom. And what does wisdom do? Wisdom allows us to make predictions about the future. Hey, that person's evil. They're probably going to get thrown in jail eventually, right? You're driving like a maniac. You're probably going to get into a car accident eventually. You're, whatever. You're going outside without sunscreen. If you do that for 12 hours in the middle of the summer, you're probably going to get burnt, right? That allows for wisdom. So we've got this knowledge about what's going on in the market. That allows us to have an understanding of, hey, Bitcoin's going here. And then we get to the third step, which is wisdom. What's the wise thing to do right now? The wise thing to do is to apply the knowledge of what we know is going on in the world, apply the understanding of what's going on in the world is going to lead Bitcoin here. And then the wisdom, the third step is, what do we do about it? Well, what should we do about it? We take the knowledge and the understanding, we use that to inform good decision making. And so good decision making right now is making investments in a market that we have a lot of confidence is going to do very well. And if a market is going to do very well, then there's every reason that we should invest in it. So we go back to our 7 laws of money. Number 1, it's not the 0th law of money. It's not God's, it's yours. It's not your money, it's God's money, so obey him. Law number 1, choose financial sovereignty. Live on less than you make. Have a written plan for your money. Avoid debt. Save and invest. And be radically generous. When we do these 7 things with money, we will succeed. So let's apply those laws in any way we can. What's a way that we can avoid debt? All right, I'm going to pay off some debt with some of the proceeds of Bitcoin at the top of the market. Okay, cool. What's some of the way we can follow the laws of money? Okay, we're going to have a budget or a written plan for our money. We're going to have an investment plan. What's our investment plan? It's real simple. Every day we invest X into Bitcoin on a certain exchange. Boom. That's one of the things that we do. We buy Bitcoin every day. We also have an altcoin position that we've already acquired. Right, we're radically generous. We say, hey, and I don't get on here and boast about it, but I'm like, hey, I'm looking around. Who can I bless in our life, right? I choose to be financially sovereign. I try and keep things organized, right? We try and keep them organized. We're following the laws of money inside of the context of investment in cryptocurrency and inside the context of God wants us to control our wealth, set it on a collision course with growth, and then use that growth to be even more generous than we ever could have been had we not have gone through the journey of growing, right? He wants us to become mature and grow so that we can bless people, and that's kind of the way this all works. So that's where I think Bitcoin's going. 150 to 200 this cycle, 2 to 3 million by the end of the 2040s. By 2030, it'll probably be between $500,000 and $750,000 for a multitude of reasons. And the way that we apply that wisely is we make good decisions based on our knowledge and our understanding, and we apply our hearts unto wisdom in a way that allows us to generate wealth so that we have more wealth to be radically generous with people. And if you do those things, you'll be glad you did. And if you don't, well, 5 years from now, I'll be playing the small violin. You'll be saying, Jeb, why didn't I listen to you? And I'm going to say, good question. Please don't miss this chance. Don't do it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. My name is Jeb McAfee. I've been teaching people for a long time how to succeed in cryptocurrency, and I want to teach you too. Peace.